Good morning. At this point in their journey, Jesus and his apostles are briskly moving around the Sea of Galilee region, effectively fleeing from the crowds, sort of like the Beatles or something like that. The crowds want more of Jesus than he can reasonably be expected to give at this point. Upon being caught up with, Jesus sees that they are fed. This feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle that is in all four gospel accounts and is perhaps a richer precursor to our Eucharistic practices than was the Last Supper, which was not itself a miracle. After all, through communion, the church does feed large numbers of people with a very physically small amount of food. In this account, 5,000 people are fed by 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. I would normally assume that the people just took very small bites and somehow got as much as they wanted out of that experience in a spiritual sense. Years ago in my youth, I was at camp where everyone in the group took very small bites of a very small piece of chocolate and passed it around. I don't remember precisely what that was intended to illustrate, but it stuck with me, and in that sense, I was fed by that experience, more so in the long run than if I'd just eaten the whole piece of chocolate myself. However, today when 5,000 people are fed, there is more food left over than there was to begin with, enough to fill 12 baskets. Fearing that he would be seized and taken by force, Jesus removes himself from the situation. Later, the apostles encounter him walking on water. There's a lot going on in this lesson, but I think the consistent portrayal of Jesus here is of someone who is trying to show through divine means what is possible through everyday means. Jesus walking on water means different things to different people. To John, the author of this account, for whom the explicit divinity of Jesus Christ is most important, I think walking on water signifies that which we as humans cannot do. We cannot defy physics or any other law of reality. Likewise, the mechanics of the feeding of the 5,000 are impossible, and I think this pairing of miracles draws attention to that point. Jesus is wont, particularly at this stage of his ministry around the Sea of Galilee region, to test his followers and see how they respond. He asks Philip the rhetorical question of how will these people be fed, before ultimately solving the problem himself as he had always planned. Andrew and a boy contribute, but the credit belongs to Jesus, and the process was a supernatural one. Jesus is swooping in to save the day with divine power, but he's also, in his elusive behavior, saying that isn't what he's there for, that he's not going to stick around and perform miracles on demand. The crowds wanted to seize Jesus and make him king by force. The apostles wanted Jesus to come into the boat with them. Neither of these things came to pass, per se. But Jesus is our king. Jesus is in the boat with us. Jesus feeds billions through wholly natural means on a regular basis. What this lesson inspired me to think of is a folk tale that is usually referred to as stone soup. There are a lot of versions of this, so forgive me if my brief retelling is different than what you might recall if you've heard this one. Basically, a group of travelers, hungry travelers, pass through a village, asking the villagers if they can spare any food. The villagers all say that they cannot. So the travelers proceed to place a stone in a pot of water and begin to boil it. The villagers are curious and ask the travelers what they're making. Stone soup, they say. It's going to be amazing, but we just need a little garlic. So one of the villagers gives them garlic. And then it's carrots. And a villager has those to spare. Then chicken or what have you, until everyone in the village has contributed a little something. The stone is removed, and what we are left with is a sublime, abundant soup, enough to feed the entire village. The travelers are fed, the village comes to the realization that it is not so poor after all. And functionally, from what appeared to have been nothing comes something. Case closed. That's a clearer illustration of how Jesus continually feeds the people. It takes us from point A to point B more tangibly than an unnamed boy presenting 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, from which Jesus makes a meal for over 5,000 people. So what's missing? I have to confess that when I made the stone soup connection this week, I was really pleased with myself. But then I did a little exploring, and while I knew it was impossible to be wholly original at this point in history, I didn't expect to so easily discover that someone had made precisely the same connection that I had. It was in this little moment of disappointment, however, this departure from confidence, that I was able to find deeper meaning in today's lesson, in Jesus' unanswered question to Philip that is really directed toward all of us in the here and now. I think we've all heard enough about feeding people, whether we are talking about communion or any sort of church function. Feeding people is a clear pillar of the Christian experience. What isn't clear, not to Philip and perhaps not always to us, is how do we, as individual Christians with individual gifts, do our own little part to feed the people? Jesus knows what's in our pantries. Jesus knows what we have that we can contribute to that pot of soup that feeds the village. It's not our task to doubt our ability to contribute, but rather to offer what we have, even if it is something so humble as 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Amen.